Iron Eagle, is going to be on the call for the NFC Championship game for Westwood 1. Pre-game coverage on this station starts at 9. You can listen to Iron Eagle on the call on 106.7 The Fan. Hey, Iron.
Hey, what's up? Good morning, guys.
Good morning. Man.
So did you have Washington on your docket for a NFC Championship game this season?
I did. Yeah, I was the only one.
Well, you're rich then. If you're rich, if that's the case, you cashed in on that. Good for you.
When did you? How many Commanders games did you do this year? I feel like you did a few.
Yeah, I had 3, 2 on TV, 1 on radio. The TV games were Carolina at Washington, Pittsburgh at Washington. Radio game was Washington at Philly.
Did you feel like?
Wow.
Did you feel like? Two things. Were the coaches giving you the idea and the belief kind of behind the scenes when you would meet with them that the guy was special, that Jayden was special? And then did you see it for yourself right away?
Oh, yeah, yes. A resounding yes on both. Coaches' meetings, Dan Quinn. I think we met with Dan first, and he said, have you met with Jayden yet? And we're like, no. He said, oh, no, you're going to be blown away. And we were. We were blown away.
Tell us why. Tell us what was it?
Look, I've been doing this a long time, started doing NFL on CBS in 1998, and part of the deal when you do the TV game is you do meet with the head coach, you meet with the quarterback, meet with a star offensive player, meet with a star defensive player. So if you go through all the years, all the games, that means I've met with the star quarterback at some point over the course of their careers. Sometimes it's more than others. Tom Brady, it's a lot. Peyton Manning, it's a lot. Drew Brees, it was a few times. Aaron Rodgers, a few times. But you get a sense of who they are and what they stand for and how they comport themselves and how people relate to them. And with that said, I met with those guys when they were really young. And some you can tell right away, and others they grow into the position. With this particular quarterback and the situation he was placed in, you could feel it right away. The respect level was so high, the savviness, and then just the maturity. Nothing seems too big. He could not have been any more likable and affable in the meeting. And then when you talk to the people around him, I know when it's lip service and you know when it's real. And this just felt real from the start.
You know what else is real is just the upgrades up and down the organization for the Commanders. I mean, Josh Harris comes in to replace Dan Snyder. It's a clear upgrade. Adam Peters, they finally have a real GM in charge of picking the players and forming the roster. Obviously, Jayden Daniels an upgrade at quarterback. And Dan Quinn is a massive upgrade over Ron Rivera and some of the other coaches that have come through this building. It's just all like coalescing at one point together.
You're right. And this is a really interesting and unique view of it because I only have my experiences going into Washington to compare it to, and certainly did enough games through the years with Dan Snyder as the owner that you would have a vibe. And again, this is just a personal experience that I can impart. Whenever we did a Washington game, if you were meeting with the home team out at their facility, you would walk through the front doors and they would immediately move you to a room to the right. So you wouldn't really go into the actual facility. They had a room set up and then they would bring the players to you and coaches to you. This year was the first time that we walked through the doors and they said, no, the meeting room is in the building, like literally among the meeting rooms in the building, as opposed to, no, we're just going to put you right here and you're not going to enter the building. So there was some strange symbolism in that when I went there the first time of, they want you to join them. They're inviting you in. It was a very different vibe. And I do think it speaks to a bigger picture, a culture change, and the fact that this team has responded to not only, as you mentioned, Dan Quinn, but management and the whole feeling around the franchise is different. It's a 180.
It's something we just don't see in the NFL. I know 6 seeds have won Super Bowls,
yes,
but not with rookie quarterbacks. So
no,
and it's just crazy. So how are you feeling about? You obviously called one of the games earlier. That was the 28-17 win. Philly beats Washington 28-17.
Yes.
and Saquon goes nuts like he did pretty much every week. But the Jalen Hurts injury...
But it was close in the fourth quarter.
It was.
It was.
The Jalen Hurts injury now is interesting. Now, maybe he'll be close to 100%. We just don't know. He didn't look it, and he's limping off the field in the tunnel last week. But how are you feeling about that and how that affects Philadelphia's offense?
Yeah, I did the game last week on radio, the snow game, and the second half where it really started to hit. And after the Hurts injury, you could feel the difference, see the difference. I gave them such a huge advantage because of his mobility and the fact that if things broke down, he would be able to break, contain, and make a play out of it. And the questions with Stafford were quite the opposite. If the play breaks down, what's going to happen? And then eventually we saw that. A lost fumble, incompletion towards the end. Stafford was terrific, but the conditions did affect him and affected the game as a whole. The Hurts thing is legit and real. His whole MO is based on mobility and the fact that you can option him and provide possibilities on every single play with Saquon and him. You could feel that in the first half, and then Saquon just took over late, as we saw. There are concerns for Philadelphia, although they're in the NFC Championship, although they are hosting it. It just doesn't feel like they have put together the complete game that you're looking for, where they just go out and dominate. And you get into a close game now with Washington, and everything has changed in the way that you look at this group because of Daniels and because of the clutch gene. He's proven it time and time again, and they just seem to make the right play in the right moment. This has definitely been a magic carpet ride experience for the Commanders.
Talking to Ian Eagle, he's calling the NFC Championship game for Westwood 1. Pregame begins at 2 p.m. You can listen to that on 106.7 The Fan. So let's talk about the challenge that Washington's defense faces in stopping Saquon Barkley. So in both games, Saquon went off against him. In the game that you called, which was 26-18 Eagles, he scores 2 touchdowns late in that game, a 23-yarder, a 39-yarder. In the next game, which the Commanders won, he started off hot early. Is there anything Washington's defense can do differently to kind of shut this guy down? And he's a home run hitter.
Yeah, probably not. I just think if you go through game by game, Saquon did not really have an off day. There were games that were explosive. There were games where he just dominated. And then there were games where it took a little while. The game you alluded to, the Thursday night game on radio that I worked, where he just wore you out. Like eventually he was going to get his. I think a lot of the mentality, and I'm sure you guys talked about it leading into the Detroit game, was, hey, this just might be one of those games where you got to go outscore the opponent. This is not going to be 24-21, and you're going to have to put up 35, 38, 42 points. In this case, 45 points. They didn't need all of those, but there was that feeling that the offense just had it rolling. And I think it might be a very similar feeling going into this one. It doesn't appear that weather is going to be a huge issue like it was last week, and this might be another one of those games where you're just going to have to score 35, 38 points to win the NFC Championship and advance to the Super Bowl. They're certainly capable of it. But if the question is, it's all going to hinge on stopping Saquon Barkley, that's your scenario that you face to win the Super Bowl or get to the Super Bowl. No, it's probably not going to work out that way.
Yeah, I figure every team that played them this year said, all right, we got to stop Barkley.
Correct.
And they just couldn't do it.
No, he's been elite. It's been the perfect marriage, guys. Sometimes it happens. And in this case, look, we saw it all play out on Hard Knocks. So there's record of it from the Giants' perspective of the fact that they realize they're going to let him go. They just don't want him to go to Philly. And that was for a number of reasons. One, of course, the division and just what the Giants fans are experiencing today. The few days leading up to the NFC Championship with 2 teams in their division, and the fact that Washington has a chance to be good for a really long time because they've got the quarterback and Philadelphia has the player they once had. the offensive line combined with Saquon Barkley, I don't know if you could come up with a better combo. It just was the perfect fit.
Mekhi Becton is he's a building.
He's a mountain of
He's
a
a
man.
skyscraper.
Yeah.
He is.
I mean, he's 6'7". He might even be taller than that. I think he's listed at 365. I mean, can you imagine trying to – I mean, look, these defensive tackles are strong too, but can you imagine trying to get around Becton or even Lane Johnson to get to Hurts? I mean, and that's what's kind of surprising is Hurts has been sacked 9 times in the playoffs. With that offensive line, I mean, Hurts has to get rid of the ball quicker. He just does.
Yeah, and think about what you're talking about on that offensive line. Lane Johnson's a perennial Pro Bowler, 6 of them. You just mentioned Becton. He comes over from the Jets, so that whole perspective that it didn't work out with the Jets, and now in Philadelphia he has fit in perfectly. They were supposed to have a drop-off with Jason Kelce retiring. Cam Jurgens slides over, makes the Pro Bowl.
Huh.
Landon Dickerson, Pro Bowl, 3 straight years. Jordan Mailata coming off injury, living up to the contract, 4 years, $64 million. Didn't play college football. Didn't play football. He was at IMG Academy and then eventually got drafted in the 7th round as a project. And he's a starting left tackle for the best offensive line in the game. So give Howie Roseman a lot of credit. He knows talent. He's recognized how to build a team. He's done it again. Philadelphia, despite whatever criticisms there were, and there were early in the season, if you remember, they found their footing, they found their formula, but they're not a high explosive passing team. That's just not who they are in their current iteration.
They aren't, but if I were Joe Witt Jr., I would be concerned that A.J. Brown only has 3 catches for 24 yards in the 2 playoff games. Like, I would feel like this could be like a potential blow-up spot for him. Like, part of the game plan is let's get A.J. Brown the ball. He's our best receiving threat, and he hasn't really been involved in the last 2 games. I'd be worried that everybody knows you're going to try to stop Saquon, but that just frees up A.J. Brown to make big plays too.
You are concerned with the inner excellence. This is what it's come down to with A.J. Brown. And the fact of the matter that the book has gotten more attention than his actual plays in the postseason so far is pretty shocking in and of itself. But he was not a huge factor. He had a big 4th down catch last week. They tried. They pushed it down the field a couple of times. They had the big penalty. Devontae Smith got popped on the play, helmet to helmet. But for the most part, that has not been part of their arsenal. I don't disagree with you. I do think at some point, especially in a game like this where you might have to score in the upper 30s to win, it can't just be Saquon. At some point, they're going to have to loosen you up going over the top.
Ian, you talked about your impressions of Jayden Daniels the first time you met him, and maybe you can talk a little bit about Dan Quinn, but we hear a lot about Nick Sirianni. He is a guy who has an unbelievable record, and yet it seems like a lot of people take shots at him. What have your impressions been of Sirianni when you've had your meetings with him?
I like the guy. I mean, we've met with him a bunch of times through the years. He's a good dude. He's a football coach, and that's what he was destined to be. His dad is a football coach. His 2 brothers, football coaches. This is who he is. That's his identity. And I think he's one of those guys, if you sat down with him one-on-one, you'd walk away and say, oh, man, I'd like to have a beer with that guy. He's just a good guy, likes to talk ball. But I do think some of the histrionics, while maybe they've been a bit conscious at times to pump up his team or to try to get the fan base to buy in, can backfire. We actually did the game. It was Philadelphia at Indianapolis, and Frank Reich had been let go. And obviously, Nick had worked for Frank, so he ended up taking it very personally that the Colts had fired Frank Reich. And they win the game, and they just barely won the game. It really came down to the last couple of plays of the game. And that's when he started pointing at the crowd, chanting, "This is for Frank." And I thought to myself, okay, who is this for really? Like, Frank Reich is the most unassuming guy. There's no possible way Frank was sitting at home watching going, yeah, Nick, you tell him. It just wasn't necessary. So I think there are moments for him where he misreads a situation and does something off of gut instinct, and it probably ends up backfiring on him. And that video was circulated, and I think most people felt, okay, that wasn't really that necessary. And ultimately, look, that's who you are. It's a part of who you are. I do think Nick is figuring it out. But if you're asking me, production meeting, no, he's a good dude.
Yeah. Just real quick before we let you go, if Washington wins this game, they'll be 15-5.
Amazing.
This team was 4-13, as you know, last year. Rookie quarterback. This is something. It's not just NFL related. This is something historical, sports related. This might be one of the greatest stories in the history of sports, not just the NFL.
Yeah, I think there are levels to it. Of course, you guys live in it every day. From the outside looking in, you could just look at the record, and it's a reminder in the NFL. If you get the right pieces, you can turn it around quickly. And that's based on so many things: strength of schedule, the division that you play in, timing, even the schedule itself, when you're catching a certain team. So that can happen. It doesn't mean it's sustainable. We have a lot of outliers, a lot of teams that pop up for a year or two, and then they fade back into oblivion. The difference with Washington is when you have a starting quarterback that you believe in at this level. This is the best rookie season that a quarterback has had in the league. I'm not just throwing it out there to pop a superlative. That's real. Look at the results, look at the numbers, look at the way he carries himself.
Mm-hmm.
But the other part of it is what the team was. It wasn't just a bad football team. There were plenty of those. It was such a dysfunctional organization. And to rise above that in such a short period of time, that's unheard of. That's the part that really, to me, takes this story to another level. So if they do advance to the Super Bowl, you're going to hear every angle covered for 2 weeks, and rightfully so. They deserve all the attention. If they don't, if they lose the NFC Championship game and Philly advances, there's going to be the Washington fan base that knows that this thing is starting to really percolate. And it's a good place to be. When you're an NFL fan and you know you've got the right coach, the right GM, and the right quarterback in play, it feels like you're in a different classification as a fan. And to me, that's the most encouraging, optimistic part for any Commanders fan out there.
Ian, look forward to hearing you on the call. It's Ian Eagle. You can listen to his call from Westwood 1 right here on 106.7 The Fan. Thanks, pal.
Thank you,
for
buddy.
the time, Ian.
Yep, looking forward to it.
And your son, by the way, is a stud. He's awesome.
Oh, dude, thank you.
He really is.
A lot.
He's really good.
Appreciate it.
Yep.
All right. Thank you, pal.
Thanks, Ian.
See ya.
Yep.
His son is Noah Eagle.
Yes, that's correct.
Yeah. Calls games.
How old is Noah?
27, maybe 27.
28. It says right here.
Yeah.
Shocker. Went to Syracuse.
Yeah, he went to Syracuse. He's a natural, just like his dad.
Yep. That's Ian Eagle.